Greetings and salutations, friends. My name is, of course, Charles Q. Banks, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Charles' Anime Episode Summary and Review of Kimetsu no Yaiba, Episode 7. So, this episode was good, definitely enjoyable, and it definitely got the plot rolling along. But there are definitely some things that I want to dig into with my critical teeth and sink into this. So, let's get right down to it. The episode begins with a recap. I do not like recaps whatsoever, but whenever there is a two-parter or a two-episode story arc, that's the industry standard to have a recap on every episode. So, the recap is Tanjiro is fighting the demon, can't get a hold of him. And Nezuko, whom I've always said as Nazeko, which is incorrect. I deserve that. She bursts out of her box and nails a demon right in the face and breaks his head. Of course, spins around and spins back, and he gets up and it continues to fight, while Tanjiro tries to defend the two human beings that are left alive from the demon's attack. Nezuko, does a flying axe kick, and that's when the opening starts up, which is exactly where the last episode ended. So that's usually how it works. I usually want something a little more from my intros, but that's okay. I understand why it's necessary. So I kind of want to get into what the demons are like, because I didn't really go into a full description of the demons. I just kind of skipped over them. They're a tripartite creation, but it's a very interesting thing here. I believe, and this is my own theory, that the demons were cut into three pieces, either by a demon slayer or just someone with a sword, who was protecting themselves, and the demon reformed from those three pieces, got their morphing abilities, and the personality was split into three. The angry one, the hungry one, and the conniving one, I guess. They don't really go into which personality is which, but it's not really important, I guess, to the story. It's just this villain will be dead, and by the next, in this episode he dies, so he's not going to be here for long. So they didn't really go into his backstory or development, but that's just my theory, and, it's always good to have well-developed characters, even if they're not going to be in the story for very long, and that's something that you don't have to do, but it adds a lot of weight to the story and realism to the world. But this story doesn't seem to be very interested in world-building now, does it? No. It is proven that it's not interested at all in world building, more interested in emotion and the overall narrative impact, rather than on technical logic or on world building. So the demons themselves have this little quirk, the multiple little quirks, that they grind their teeth whenever they're extremely angry, which, doesn't everybody, but they grind their teeth so hard that it creates the sound of, nails on a chalkboard. Grinding so hard it actually makes a sound that is able to be heard across the room. And so that's really frightening and interesting and weird. It reminds me of, biblical literature where in the netherworld there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. The angry undead are so incensed over what is happening to them that they are grinding their teeth. And I don't know if that's intentional, that this grinding of the teeth is a mythological reference, but it really is cool. It adds something, at least something interesting as a quirk, if you're not going to go into the backstory. So with Nazeko fighting the different demons, or one of the different demons, and Tanjiro defending against the other two, there's obviously a stalemate happening here. Nezuko runs after one of the demons, and Tanjiro's like, wait, don't go too far, don't chase after them, they're going to attack you back, come back here. And there's obviously this little back and forth, there's a pause here, which indicates something about Nezuko. While she does understand Tanjiro and human speech, it does take a little while for things to actually sink in. He has to speak to her kind of like a child in order for her to understand. Although she seems perfectly capable of understanding situations and acting in a way that, I don't know, an adult might. She doesn't attack him, she doesn't attack the other people, partially because of, our boy Tengu's hypnotism, but she seems to be very well able to take care of herself, and that's something that Tanjiro, sees. She vaults over one of the demon's attacks and comes right over to him without a second thought. And I love the femininity that is shown in all her movements. Like, no matter what she's doing, whether she's doing an axe kick or, taekwondo moves, she always has a little bit of a feminine affectation, which is awesome, and I really like that. She's still her own person. She's not just a demon with claw attacks. She is a taekwondo mistress and a female person. Like, she's the sister of Tanjiro, and that's still showing through quite nicely, and I really like that about her character. I wish we'd be able to hear her voice or something more from her, but oh well. Again, there's that whole question of why is the stinking bamboo shoot still in her mouth? If she is able to keep herself from biting people and attacking people, if she doesn't even take the bamboo thing off, then it's obvious that she will not attack people. She can attack people anyways, and she's not doing that, so why keep the bamboo in her mouth? It's unexplained, and it's completely unnecessary because of what has been shown. She is absolutely okay with not eating humans, which again is something that shows up later as something that I don't get. And we'll get into that now. So, Tanjiro jumps into the swamp, asking Nezuko to stay behind so that she can protect the two civilians, which she agrees to. Of course, there's a little moment where Tanjiro is like realizing that she has her own ability to protect herself, but we've seen that happen multiple times before, so I don't understand why he's thinking of it now. It's almost as if he's just doing it for the audience's benefit. Like, we've seen it too, guy. Like, there's no reason to go into a whole narrated, like, thought pattern as to why she's able to defend herself. Obviously, she's a demon. Obviously, she has superhuman powers. And obviously, she's willing to protect the innocent. But there's this little, paragraph that he thinks to himself, Tengu was telling me that she's a demon and has superpowers now, so maybe she can even take care of herself. And he actually says something to the effect of, Nazeko can protect herself. She's not so weak that I have to protect her. Maybe. And it's like, well, you don't have to go that far, Tanjiro. I would still protect your sister, but, she's still able to protect herself a little bit. We need to protect each other here. But anyway, that's just a small thing. And so he decides, while she protects the two civilians, he will jump in to the netherworld and fight the demons on his own, which is a crazy idea and really courageous of Tanjiro. Because, I myself have kind of a fear of water, being underwater. So when he jumped in there, I was like, oh my gosh, I tensed up. It's like, ugh. And especially because it's like all this dark, murky water, it's horrifying. But he goes in there and is fighting the demons in this swamp, nether realm, while Nezuko is fighting the demon that is above ground. And the demon starts fighting her and is saying, wow, she's so powerful. She hasn't learned any morphing skills yet, but she is still able to attack so strongly. And she's, kicking him in the head, punching him in the gut. And he's thinking to himself, she's so powerful, I don't know if I can defend against all of her attacks. Even if my organs are turned to mush, and even if my head is knocked off, I'll still be able to regenerate, so I have the upper hand. He's like encouraging himself because she's so powerful of a combatant. Which is cool, but at the same time, she's not necessarily a demon slayer. She just has some taekwondo training, I guess. That's assumed But, like, she's doing all of these martial arts moves, and of course it's understood that all throughout Japanese history, and Chinese history for that matter, people have always learned martial arts to a certain degree just amongst themselves to protect themselves, which is not so much the case here in the West. We've kind of relied on guns more than anything. But anyway, so she is fighting him, and the guy says, she is so strong, she must have been taking tons of that kid's blood. And it's like, wait a minute, just slow down here, let's inspect this. So he thinks that she has been drinking Tanjiro's blood for a long time, and that would explain why she's so strong. I agree with him. I think that would definitely explain why she's able to even be awake in the first place. But the problem is, we know for a fact, we, the audience, know that she has not been drinking Tanjiro's blood, she has not been eating any human flesh, she hasn't been eating anything for years. And so, for him to say this, it kind of shows a plot hole that if she has been drinking Tanjiro's blood, the show hasn't told us this. And if she hasn't, there is no reason for her to be as strong as she is. So that's just a big plot hole that the show itself dug itself into, and I don't know what to think about it. How to explain it, how to justify it. Maybe it's just that, the blood of Tanjiro familially is strong enough to overcome these obstacles because the Komodo clan is just super powerful or something. I don't know. You have to justify things. You have to write the story yourself a lot of the time in this show because it just will not explain itself. So it's just a wide open question. Why is Nezuko able to be awake? Why is she able to be strong and not go ravenous, even though she has every right to? And why hasn't she taken the darn bamboo thing off? So the fight continues underground in the Netherworld, which is not necessarily underground, but it is like in this other dimension, which is a swamp under this watery place. And Tanjiro is seeing the clothes of all of the victims of the demons floating in the water, which is kind of creepy and very dark. And he's like, this is not forgivable. And so then there's a short battle where all of the demons are going around him and they're gritting their teeth strongly. And that's very emphasized, like the loudness of the teeth and the fact that they're grinding them super loud is really emphasized. It zooms in on their teeth a whole lot. I don't know why, because I was expecting this to be something of a plot point, that maybe he could hear them and locate them, echolocate them. Maybe he has super hearing abilities, we don't know. There's no reason not to believe that, since his nose abilities have never been explained either. But no, the gritting of the teeth and the grinding away have nothing to do with anything. The demons start to verbally abuse him and try to discourage him and are like, yeah, being down here with us, there's no oxygen down here and you won't be able to breathe, and the darkness is also coiling around you and making it harder for you to swim, isn't it? And he's like, you underestimate me. And this is a part of the show that I really like, actually. The part of this episode is that he is in the swamp, and the demons are thinking that he is going to drown here, that this is their domain. But we know, and there's actually a little flashback, which I think was kind of unnecessary, but there is a flashback to episode 2 and 3 when he is training on Sagiri Mountain. He's like, you underestimate me. You don't know that the air was just as thin, nearly as thin, up on Mount Sagiri. And a lot of the training that Tanjiro went through was learning to control his breathing. So he's able to not breathe underwater, but he's able to definitely hold his breath for extended periods of time and exercise, go through difficult physical labor. So that's like, it's a setup. it's definitely a setup as well as a payoff, because it was set up in the two other episodes 2 and 3, and now it's paying off in a way that we can understand and is a measurable increase in skill. Because of his training on Mount Sagiri, he is now able to fight demons in the netherworld underwater, which is like, yes, nailed it, show. Set up and payoff, Chekhov's gun. And in a way that we probably would never have thought of. I would never have thought of him being able to go underwater and fight demons just because he's been on the mountain for a long time, but it does make logical sense. He has built up his lung capacity to such an extent that he is able to do this. The next sentence, however, makes no sense at all, and at least not to us, the audience, because we haven't been clued into this. But he says, not only that, but there are certain moves that are only able to achieve their full potential underwater. And we're like, there are? Like, I haven't seen him training underwater that much. I mean, he's been training under a waterfall, but, like, what kind of attacks are you going to be using underwater? We haven't seen this. There's no documentation. There's no previous setup for what happens next, which is the whirlpool attack, which is sixth form. Again, we've never seen sixth form. We've never seen him doing any of these things, so there's no setup to him perfectly executing a whirlpool attack, which causes like an underwater tornado, and just the pressure of the water, apparently, swirling out from his body, is able to cut the demons to ribbons, which is pretty darn cool. But the sound design in this moment is strangely lacking. Like, the sound design is very good in this show, generally speaking. But right in this moment, when the demons are being cut to ribbons, there is no sound of cutting or ripping, just of, which maybe underwater you wouldn't hear cutting or ripping, but the impact of them being ripped apart is nullified by there being no sound effects for them being ripped to shreds. And it's very morbid and gross, but and effective. We see what's happening, but the sound just doesn't live up to the visuals here. It's a total missed opportunity, a total error. There should be some sound effects to them coming apart. It just seems like they were like something that's dissolving. But so, this happens, and our boy is victorious, and then he kind of gets distracted by one of the shreds of their bodies, and one of their coats, and he swims over to it, takes it in his hand, looks at it for like 3 seconds, and his eyes soften, and he's looking at it, and you're thinking, what is he looking at? And then he realizes that he's not able to breathe, and he says, oh, I can't breathe. It's like, dude... Of course not. You've been holding your breath this whole time. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm underwater or I am holding my breath, I'm not distracted by anything. Like, the first thing on my mind is holding my breath long enough to accomplish a goal. I'm not going to be distracted by pretty colors or something, looking at something and thinking about it. If I see something interesting, I'm going to grab it and swim to the surface. But instead, it's that kind of cartoony thing that is always overlooked in shows like this, where the character is underwater and he's not being bothered at all by not being able to breathe until he realizes that he's not able to breathe, and then he swims to the surface. And it's like, that's not okay. It's just kind of silly. But it's a trope, and it's just like, it was really funny, actually. And that's something else about this episode in particular. It's very, very slow-paced. Episodes, I think, 2 through 6 were very quickly paced. 6 less so, has kind of the similar pacing to this episode, but at least through 5 had pretty quick, snappy pacing. Episode 1 was really slow and methodical feeling, with really, which slowed down considerably throughout the episode. In this one, It's like every few seconds the characters are pausing and considering something. Even when Nezuko was fighting the demon, she would do an attack, he would back up, he would look at her and smile and hold it for like half a second, and then start going down into the void, and then she would see that he's going down into the void. She would react, and then get ready to attack, hold it for half a second, and then go, and it's like, this happens constantly. Even when Tanjiro is attacking, he sees them, reacts, decides to do something, and then does it, rather than a fast, fluid form of pacing that would make much more sense, because as human beings, we don't really do that. Sometimes we just do things on instinct, and if someone is coaxing us, we will react immediately in the moment, rather than just stand there and look at it. And so these pauses are very awkward. They are not natural at all. And if you watch the episode, you will know what I'm talking about. So something else about Nezuko's design that I actually do really like, which I've skimmed over this entire time, is her hair. At the tips of her hair are these like orangey red highlights, which start at a particular place and terminate at the ends of her hair braids or whatever. And it's really cool. It almost looks like tentacles. And I am assuming, since we did not see those in the first episode, that those orange hair tips only manifested once she became a demon. And that's part of her being a demon. It's just really neat looking, and multiple times they are kind of emphasized when the demon is attacking her and she is ducking away, and then the hair gets hit and there's like little red flash of hair being cut off, and it's like, ooh, nice. And the animation in general is still nice, and I think this entire show is going to be visually the most consistent animation I've ever seen in a show. There are no weird frames where the character is just completely off model, to my knowledge. Just watching it, casually. Well, it's not really casual, I'm paying attention. But I'm not, like, stopping to watch every frame. It's so consistent. It's still very simplistic, but most of the time, when anything is being zoomed in upon, there's a fair amount of detail to it. And the designs themselves are very well constructed to be both simple and eye-catching and striking. And it's also very accurate to the period, the type of clothing that they're wearing, especially when they're, separated by miles and miles of mountain country from Tokyo, which we also see in this episode, very well developed and technologically advanced compared to where they live. So there's a lot of authenticity going on in the character designs and the clothing and fashion going on, which I really am able to appreciate, at least. So yeah, so another thing about the swamp fight, before we move on any further, is the fact that Tanjiro was able to use his sixth form attack, which included water breathing technique, underwater, when he could not breathe. Now, there are two options here. Either the water breathing technique literally allows him to breathe underwater, or he was doing a technique that required proper breathing without breathing, which means he could not have done it, generally speaking. Now, you can, obviously, with, like I said, the setup for him being able to do amazing moves underwater is squeaky clean. It's perfect. It's set up that he can do these moves well, even when he cannot breathe. The problem is that these techniques, in all of these different forms, require either total concentration technique or water breathing technique, which require him to not just to actually be breathing faster. It was explained in episode, I think, 4. It was explained in episode 4 that he had to breathe quickly and in a controlled way in order to get his body into the shape needed to kill demons, to get into like a heightened state of strength. And he's still able to do this even though he's not breathing. It may not. It's a very tenuous idea. I don't think he should have been able to do this attack in particular with the magical ability underwater. He could have slashed at them. He could have done any number of amazing feats. But the breathing technique being mentioned while he's underwater makes no sense whatsoever. Unless, like I said, it allows one to literally breathe underwater. But then, if it allows him to breathe underwater, then why can he not breathe in the next moment when he takes the cloth and then realizes he can't breathe? No sense. So then he goes up to the surface, and begins to go up to the surface, and the demon is starting to gain the upper hand against Nezuko. And he scores a hit on her forehead, and he's about to go in for the kill when Tanjiro, like a rocket, as if he's shot out of a cannon, shoots out of the water, perpendicular, like at an angle from the flat plane of the water, straight to the demon, and cuts his arm off faster than the demon, who is already lunging at Nezuko, can reach her. And it makes no gosh darn sense. Just like a lot of the other things in this episode don't make sense. And how did he know where the demon was? Well, right after this, once he cuts off both of the demon's arms, he starts talking to the demon and saying, "I could smell you, the rotten scent of old rotten oil. It's a horrible scent, and I could smell it. And I was able to pinpoint where you were." Problem with that is, you can't smell underwater unless you're breathing. So, unless he literally peeked his head up out of the water, sniffed him, and then went after him, he could not have possibly pinpointed the demon and shot out of the water without literally seeing or smelling him, which he would have to have done outside of the water. So anyway, those are the main problems that this episode exposes the audience to. It just makes no darn sense, and he's able to smell this guy's fear, which, that's an old trope. You smell your fear, savages, they can smell your fear, an old-timey way of thinking, but that also makes no sense. But it makes no sense here either, I think, and I'm still pressing on that. Like, his nostrils make no sense, neither does Tengu's ability to smell emotion make sense, and this show has to reveal that, or else it just loses all integrity as a tense show with actual stakes. So, he actually begins interrogating the demon, intelligently this time. The demon begins talking about how you should be, okay with me killing your women, because once they reach a certain age, they begin to stink and taste like crap. And so he cuts his mouth, which is a very, brutal thing to do, punishing him for being such a misogynist. And he's asking him, "You're going to tell me what you know about Muzen Kibutsuji." He's become much more cruel and much more brutal since we saw him trying to figure out how to find the cure for his sister since he was in the mysterious forest. And he has the clue of Muzan Kibutsuji's name to interrogate him with, and the demon begins going nuts with fear, and he will not tell him, and he attacks him and has to be slain. So in a flashback, we see Muzan Kibutsuji, and it is the exact same fellow that we had heard about before, and talked of by Tengu as being the man who has the fedora. Is great, because now we have a main villain for our character to go after. The demon is able to see in his mind, in the flashback, this guy, Muzan, with the white fedora and the white pants, the Western attire, telling him never to tell anyone who Muzan is. And we are, as the audience, are clued into who he is, but Tanjiro isn't. We see the flashback, and then Tanjiro has to kill the demon because he attacks him. He then offers the poor guy whose fiance was killed the piece of cloth that actually had his fiance's ribbon on it. And he cries and is like, you could never understand, how horrible this is. But then, of course, Tanjiro just looks at him and turns away. And the guy realizes that he's gone through the same thing, hasn't he? Well, it's like he's actually had his whole family killed. And, this is kind of a trope, which I'm kind of okay with, because we human beings are very emotionally intelligent people. We can tell certain things about people just by the way they look or act, but usually communication is required. And Tanjiro doesn't say a word about what's happened to him, and the guy is just kind of able to understand that he's gone through... He's lost people, too. Are you really able to understand that from just a look that people have? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. So he leaves. He says goodbye. He forgives him for saying all that horrible stuff about him, that he couldn't possibly understand what he's going through. And he turns into a 3D model as he's leaving, which doesn't make any sense. It's not the worst. It's not... The worst thing about it is that it's just a little bit distracting. It's not the same type of motion that we've seen in the normal, traditional anime style that this show is good at. So it's just like, it could have done without it, but I gave it a pass. Because it's going to be happening throughout the rest of the show. During the action scenes, there were these strange panning shots where Nezuko is looking at the demons and she's going to attack them, and it zooms in on the demons and then does this pull effect, and that reveals that the environment is CGI, allowing you to fluidly move the camera around the CGI environment and then animate the characters in later, or vice versa. I don't think it's necessary at all. There weren't that many moments that I thought the panning or the movement of the camera was actually doing anything for the show, anything for the shot. It's not making the action any better by having a full CGI environment. But that's just my opinion. Maybe you like it. Right after he defeats the demons and is walking away from the man, of course, there's the little girl that he saved, thank God, is still there, and she's still unconscious, and he leaves her in the care of the fiancé guy. Problem is, she's still unconscious, and it's like, is she dead? Is she alive? Well, they're assuming she's alive, but being unconscious without being asleep is not good, and I would expect a little bit more care to be taken of this poor woman. Nevertheless, he continues on with Nezuko, and the crow, the messenger crow, comes down, rests on his shoulder, and starts yelling at him again, "The next mission is in Tokyo!" And he's like, "What? A new mission right off the bat? Are you serious?" And he's like, "Yes, I'm serious. Get to it." And they which is really funny. The crow voice, I cannot say enough, is just hilarious. But they go to Tokyo, and it is this vast, sprawling city with skyscrapers, or at least, the beginnings of skyscrapers, and the whole area is filled with people, totally crowded, and it's revealed that, he's been living on the outskirts of society all this time. There's a lot of variants of clothing and fashion. The window shops are very bright and filled with light, electrical light, and his eyes are just popping out of their sockets, and it shows a little bit of an art style that we haven't seen since the training arc, where it just goes full cartoonish, with him being like this ridiculous caricature of himself, while he's being blown away by the newness of modernity, which I think is awesome. Like, having this character be kind of a fish out of water in the city is a really cool side to this story, and it really, I think, is starting to flesh out the reason as to why this story is set in the Taisho era, specifically 1912, 1913, and not in other periods. Like, I think it should be, if it's a demon show, set probably in the Edo period, where it's still like samurais and the mythology kind of makes sense in it. But no, this is a modern myth taking place in the 20th century, and that makes it a little bit more interesting. So I'm interested to see what else they do with it. So he goes and he's, completely out of his depth, and Nezuko is falling asleep. They go to get some ramen. He takes a drink of the ramen, and all of a sudden he smells the smell of a demon. And it's the smell of the demon that killed his family. And so he drops the bowl, and it shatters, and the ramen with the egg and the ground yam on it is just splattered on the floor, and it's like, no! I was very sad for that drop of the ramen. But he goes straight after the smell and leaves behind Nezuko, which is like, what are you doing? Like, she's going to get captured, or something horrible is going to happen. They're going to get separated in the next episode. And if they don't, that makes no sense. So it's like, this is being set up probably for a separation episode, or he has to try and find her in the next one. But he catches up to the smell, which I didn't think he would. I thought maybe he'll see him in the distance and not be able to get to him. But he finds him in the crowd, and it is the white fedora'd man. And I like his fashion sense a lot, myself. He has a nice floral muffler against his black suit and white pants. And he reacts to Tanjiro seeing him, and Tanjiro, begins taking out his katana, but then it is shown that the guy, Muzen, is holding a baby, a human baby, and he has a human wife. And this throws Tanjiro for a loop. He's not able to draw his sword. He's totally surprised by this, and he's thinking, as he should, do you not know who this is? Can't you tell that this guy is a demon? What is wrong with you people? You should get away from this guy. What is happening? And then Muzen, who kind of sees what's happening here, and himself has totally red eyes, turns quickly, slashes some guy across the back of the neck, which turns that guy directly into a demon, and he begins to attack his own girlfriend, bites her, and is sucking her blood, and Tanjiro's just watching this surprised, whereas I think he's kind of ready for this, right? He should be jumping into action, attacking this demon. But he is just completely overwhelmed with emotion and is unable to act, and that's when the episode ends. So we're being led up to some crazy fights going on, possibly that separation between him and Nezuko that I mentioned. But I'm really happy that we finally have a main villain to go after. And it's the same guy who attacked his family, like, confirmed. So yeah, when you see this guy in the intro, you don't think, oh, he's the main villain. You think, oh, he's kind of villainous. Maybe he's like, a bounty hunter or a neutral, chaotic neutral type character. But no, he's the main baddie, as far as we know. And this is the guy upon whom Tanjiro must take revenge in order to satisfy the story. So I'm excited to see what happens in the next episode. Let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments, and like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell if you like my stuff and want to see more. So until next time, thanks for watching, and farewell.